do it. I will do it. I will take that responsibility.
All right, man. Thank you. Kind of like your style.
Okay. Now, hush up. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Undersampled Radio, episode 17. It's a pretty exciting. Episode 17 is going to go down in the history books as one of the more exciting Undersampled Radio episodes. 2 reasons. Number 1, we have an awesome guest. But number 2, we have a new home on the internet. And hey, Matt, what's that home? What's the URL?
So it's undersampledradio.io.
I was
say those.
I was saying rad. Like it's totally radical.
Rad.io.
Okay, rad.io. Undersampled Radio. Yeah, it was tempting to go down the whole really clever path of actually undersampling the name as well, but it just I couldn't type it the same way twice. So undersampledrad.io, and yeah, I think it's still a little bit of a work in progress. Is that fair to say? Because it doesn't look quite as awesome yet as as you had it originally on your site, Graham. But that's where all the stuff's going to go. And what about? So I wasn't completely caught up on the iTunes story. Is that happening yet? Probably by the time this goes out, it'll be happening. Is that the plan?
Maybe. All I'm saying for now is that if you go to undersampledrad.io, you can listen to the episodes or download them or stream them or whatever, and that's good enough. We'll have to deal with iTunes crud later on.
Yeah, I feel like these things like that, whenever I come across them, and I was talking to my wife about this the other day because she's been working with someone, she's in publishing, right? So she's working with someone who's producing a book, and they'd written a wiki article. Well, she hadn't written it herself, but her husband had written it about her. And, so there were lots of problems with the article. And, when you do, like, it's the first time he'd ever written a Wikipedia article. And, there are lots of problems with it, from notability to citations and all the rest of it, but all totally fixable. And I was trying to help my wife out with it, and I've obviously done lots of wiki editing, so it's a lot of things that I take for granted. And she's looking at this, this wiki markup and the whole sort of editing paraphernalia and doing citations properly and all this sort of thing, going, I can't believe this is how all these things work. Like, when you look under the hood of most of the internet, it's so hard. Like, iTunes has been so difficult. It's like, how are any of the awesome things happening? Anyway, so enough of that, but still, it's amazing how much work some of these things take.
It is, and getting large entities like Apple to work on your little tiny podcast that no one listens to it's hard to get your voice heard. Okay, so 2 other awesome things that I want to talk about here. Number 1 is, because we have the new home on the internet and I had to test things earlier, if you go to our YouTube account right now, which is where our live videos are hosted, you'll see a video of my dog, Maverick, there, smiling, grinning at you. He's a cutie pie, so go check him out. Number 2, we have had this, and this actually pertains to geophysics in a way, more like signal analysis. My office is very white noisy because there's a huge AC system, something like that, and I didn't know how much of the noise was contributed by the ventilation system and like the rumblings of streetcars going past on the streets and stuff like that. But turns out I'd say it's about 95%, because right now my noise levels are really, really low. So that's pretty exciting. So there's the little experiment. Oh, by the way, my air conditioning is off, so I'll start sweating in a minute. And now on to real news. Matt, what happened? There was a conference or something like that last week, right?
There was SciPy in Austin, and having a little bit of a hard time talking about it because I like going to SciPy and didn't this year. And yeah, so anyway, I guess the main thing is that one of the really cool things about SciPy is they put all the videos of all the talks and all the tutorials and all of the sort of supporting material, GitHub repos, all the rest of it up pretty much right away. So already you can go and find dozens and dozens of videos of the talks. And I absolutely recommend going and having a look through them. And if you want the kind of highlights reel, I'm going to try and do a blog post on that in the near future, like this week. But if you go to swung.rocks, so the sort of back channel for this show on swung.rocks, well, actually, if you go to the Python channel, I guess, in that Slack, you will find that we were chatting about a bunch of the highlights last week. There's all sorts of cool stuff in there. One of my favorites, I'll just go on to say, is this new sort of internet journal, peer-reviewed, called Rescience. So rescience.github.io. And I love the concept. I think they've only published one paper so far. They've got a few more in the works. And the idea is that it's stuff that it's basically re-implementations, reproductions of existing research. So someone publishes a paper, it's not clear how they did it, or they didn't publish their code and or data. Someone else goes, okay, I'm going to reproduce that. That paper, the second sort of derivative paper, can go into this Rescience journal. So yeah, love that concept. We need more of that.
Very cool. I'm looking at the site now.
I'm sorry. Is it only geophysics then?
No. It's science.
Okay.
Science. Yeah. But I doubt they have any geophysics yet.
Yeah. That's such a cool idea. You know, I went to a talk. I did this bar camp thing in New Orleans this weekend, which was a ton of fun. And it was nice to do an unconference-y, totally off the wall type of thing. Like one of the talks I listened to was about how to win at Monopoly. I thought it was going to be some sort of like clever optimization scheme or some real techie thing, and no, this guy was just like, I like to play Monopoly. I'm going to tell you my strategy to do it. It was pretty cool. Okay.
I cheat ruthlessly.
I would like Matt to introduce our guest because they've known each other for a while and they're both doing awesome things. So, Matt, take it away.
Welcome, Maitri Erwin. I won't say too much because we'll get into it in a minute. But I was actually looking back through Twitter because Maitri is another person I met on Twitter. I'm pretty sure that's kind of how we became acquaintances before we met in person. And it seems like there are some conversations from back then, but the dates are wrong, so I couldn't quite figure out when it was that we kind of got to know each other. But it was years ago, at least 5 years ago, and yeah, just a sort of really awesome internet. What would you call it? Sort of a resident of the internet. So Maitri is one of these people that I always look to for like how to behave, what's interesting, how to use the internet for good, and how to find cool things to read. Loads of the things in my, I use the old reader as a blog reader, and Maitri stars things and tags things, so it's really awesome. I really like seeing things that she's sort of pinned because I know they're going to be awesome. And she's all over Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and yeah, just too many things to mention, really. All the links are in the show notes. Thank you for joining us, Maitri. Where are you right now?
I am in Houston right now, and it's a balmy 100 degrees out, and we actually had a rain shower finally after weeks of no rain, so my poor plants and grass are not dying right now.
Houston. Wow, it's years since I was in Houston. What are you like right downtown? Like, do you have to drive around a lot where you are, or?
I like to maintain a very small footprint in Houston, so we actually centrally located this place north of so we're right in what you would call the Greater Heights, or right outside the inner loop, the loop of Houston. Gotcha. And where I live is central to getting downtown, going to the Woodlands, and also to the energy corridor. So should jobs change in this wonderful economy we're in right now, you know, it's going to be a little less of a hellish commute rather than a fully hellish commute.
Yeah, right. Totally. Yeah. I always find Houston just a remarkable place to be because I feel like it's the polar opposite of where I live, and yeah. So I hear you. You don't want to spend too much time in the car. So what are you into these days?
Work.
Yeah.
A lot of work. Again, like we were mentioning earlier, you know, I feel very fortunate to be somebody who still has a job in this terrible economic climate, and going deeper into exploration. So I switched from a role working as a prospect maturation manager in the Gulf of Mexico to very frontier exploration of Latin America, which includes South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. It's all very new, very early days yet. We're still formulating a team. I mean, the company's still trying to wrap its head around just exploration in this very different continent that has traditionally been ruled, I should say, by national oil companies and very few independent oil companies. So it's an interesting transition. Like I always say, you know, keep your opportunities open and your chin up. You know, I've always had this rather peculiar attitude towards life in general, and that's, don't be afraid of the circumstances, because if you fail, it's another growth opportunity. It's what Cecilia Rose calls AFGO, you know, another effing growth opportunity. So
thank you for my growth opportunity. So, like, one of the things I wrote down earlier, it's just it feels to me. Now you're not as long in the tooth as I am, but it feels to me like this downturn is kind of different from previous downturns. Like this one feels like things, like the world is going to be a different place when and if the industry emerges from this thing. Do you have a sense, like you're in a place where they're surrounded by geoscientists and commerce, like do you have a sense for that? Or is everyone just kind of going, please let it get back to normal?
Everyone wants it to get back to normal, but there are two things happening, and one is I think society as a whole finally wants it to be an alternatives-based energy society. You know, they just don't want to deal with oil and gas and the uncertainties, and I think a lot of the wars that we fight abroad are taking their toll on how we view our relationship with oil. Another thing also has to do with how we work. We're not ever going to rebound, because now the industry knows that it can get a lot of things done with fewer people. So this new this new mantra is do more with less. So if they can squeeze a lot of work, I won't say productivity, but if they can squeeze a lot of work out of fewer people, I don't think we're ever going to go back to that paradigm where you required 20 people to work a team. I think they're going to be 5 or 6, maybe 10 at the most people working teams. But I go ahead.
How is this downturn different than other downturns in that respect?
That's because we're losing people, you know. For instance, they kept talking to us about this big crew change of how there are not many people in the profession. Not forget the industry. There are not many people in the profession who are in, say, Matt's and my demographic. I don't know your age, Graham, and we don't have to discuss that on the air right now. But very few people in late 30s, you know, early 40s, going into early 50s even. So we've lost a lot of mentors. We've lost a lot of knowledge with this downturn, for sure. Not just because people are retiring. It's not the regular attrition. They just, it's almost like they, and I hate to use this word, but deadheaded at a certain age, and there went the bulk of the knowledge. And they were not doing proper knowledge transfer and technology transfer when they had the opportunity. You know, students were coming in with, at least in geophysics and the geosciences, you have to have at least a master's degree. So students were coming in with masters and PhDs, and they're very technologically savvy, but they just don't have that history. They don't understand how this is not, at least in oil and gas, it's not science lab anymore. It's not research anymore. It's a business. So there's an art to it. There's a certain way you go about it, and I don't think that those skills were transferred very well. And people of all ages were let go, and that's because, I'll be very honest with you, at some point they started hiring every warm body that they could get to do the work, and then they found out that they didn't have the time nor the inclination to train and to train up to a certain expectation level. And so I think a lot of young people didn't get the training they were supposed to, and now when they look to the older generation, the more experienced generation, to train those young people. He said, no, we have to lay off all of these people who make a ton of money, and it's easier to put them into retirement than chop the job of somebody who's maybe in their late 20s or early 30s, because they cost a lot less. So I understand the economic realities. I understand that we don't have money to pay people, but I really think that a lot more people had taken on Oxy's model, where Vicky Hollub said, we are not letting go of people. Well, again, there's a trick to that. My next door neighbor, took an early retirement package from Oxy, and but she did so willingly, and they've kept on people to train the next generation. So I really think that people were hasty this time in letting people go. So I think to answer your question, Graham, how is it different? I think we let too many people go too soon. I think that the knowledge transfer was just not done, and I think that we're going to stick with this model of do more with less, because they can do it.
Do you think we, I suppose, as individuals and also as a as an industry or as a sector of the of commerce, can we be part of how we get to the next sort of energy? I don't want that to be too kind of grand or open-ended a question, but I guess I wonder a bit if it's just a thing that's going to happen to us, or how we can be part of being part of it. And I wonder if a smaller, more compact workforce that doesn't have, because with deep experience goes entrenched ways of doing things, I wonder if that's actually more likely to be more sort of open, more agile, if you like, and getting into that new energy than the business as usual scenario.
I definitely think it can be done, and that's what I tell young people these days, is to keep their options open. Don't just go into a master's program in geophysics and they go, well, the only program of study that's being offered is straight up geophysics. And I said, well, then you have to take the personal initiative to take more science classes and more just programming, technology, geoscience. Don't attach yourself or limit yourself to the pre-prescribed program of study. That just because it's a major doesn't mean there are not other classes and options available to you if you want to be smart about it.
I do worry a bit that the universities are going to, weirdly, because they don't have the same kind of economic pressure to get on and change.
Right.
They might be the last people actually to kind of wake up
took
in
the
new
words,
reality.
Yep, took the words right out of my mouth about that point. But then you look at things like you look at Tesla, and Tesla's getting a lot more attainable by people with more modest incomes. I think Tesla's going to be a great model for the true Volkswagen, the real people's car in the future. And technologies people will find a way to make technologies that go in that direction. Sometimes you have to be pressured by major shifts. There's this new company right now, very unfortunate name, goes by the acronym DONG. It's Danish oil and natural gas. They just did a big wind offering. So things like that are happening. And this is an oil and gas company that suddenly decided that it was going to invest a large percentage of its budget and its expenditure in wind. And I think we need to be prepared for that. I think that if we really cling to the proverbial dinosaur, we're just we're not going to move forward. But again, I too don't want to be too open-ended about it. There's a lot of infrastructure to change. For instance, Houston is just highways galore to take care of more and more cars that are coming on the market.
Mm-hmm.
When do we switch to a comprehensive, useful mass transit system down here?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Will we? Similarly, look at China. I mean, they have all the bullet trains, but they just have so many people. They have so many goods and resources that they need to move around. I don't know how quickly those kinds of superpowers with a lot of money and a lot invested in an oil and gas infrastructure are going to change. But I think you're going to have to, when you find out that it's going to get more and more expensive, your break-even costs to extract oil and gas are going to increase. And when that happens, and when you can no longer make a considerable profit, and when your margins are, slimming, what are you going to do? I think that eventually that investors, shareholders, and also the technologies themselves are going to move us into that new future. But when, I don't know.
So how do we push students into the arena of studying or becoming interested in alternative energies, especially coming from an industrial standpoint? Let's leave the academics aside here, but as industry leaders, how can we encourage students to study new avenues of science?
I think it's in telling them that these traditional jobs are not going to exist in the future. Just look at how the world is changing right now. I don't think that, I'm not saying that the drilling superintendent or the oil man or whatever is going to go away very soon. But if you look at the landscape, and the ideas have to come from somewhere, and the ideas are drying up. I think that's how you entice. Other than that, I've always said abolish the major, and I know we're not talking academics yet, but I think it has to come from a personal incentive to want to set yourself apart from everyone else and not take the easy road, because where's that easy road going to take you? You can I was just reading an article about, I'm good at science, I want to get a PhD, now I don't have a job. So, okay, so part of me is torn, right? Okay, everybody who, I really want to encourage science for science's sake. I want people to do PhDs in geophysics or chemistry or whatever floats your boat, because that's a passion. How do you take a passion out of a human being? But then what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that PhD? It's why I took myself out of a PhD program and went for a second master's, because I just couldn't see myself in school for 5 years and then struggling to fit into an academic position, which I knew I wasn't cut out for. And why put off the inevitable? So I pulled myself out of the PhD track early on, went for the second master's, and went towards oil and gas, just because I knew that I really wasn't cut out for a life of professorship. So if I think what we can do is really encourage young people to do this kind of introspection early on, and say, think about reality, think about what you want your life to look like in 5 years and 10 years. And oh my God, the future comes so quickly. Trust me, it did. So, and then what are you going to do to prepare yourself for that? And I think each one of you go out and talk to a young person and say, what do you think your life is going to look like in 5 years, 10 years? And do that kind of planning.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? I mean, it's there's a sort of funny situation here in Nova Scotia at the moment with sort of just thinking about technology and people at university, following their passion. So there's these there's an astrophysics department in St. Mary's University. So they're churning out undergraduates, graduates, I guess, and postgrads in astrophysics, which, you know, doesn't have a great deal of kind of applied. There isn't a big marketplace. But these graduates are basically some of the best people around, trained in programming and statistics, and everyone's trying to hire machine learning kind of not experts, but just anyone who's heard of machine learning and wants to do a bit more learning, can read a manual and so on. So these people are suddenly highly desirable, and I don't think they necessarily planned it like that, but I love how there's this really hot market for people who probably thought, what am I going to do with an astrophysics degree, right? So yeah, I love that advice about like looking around, looking at other sort of parallel markets, if you like, and just trying to add some diversity to your personal portfolio, kind of thing, right? Just to sort of give yourself that opportunity, right? Because you don't know where it's going to come from potentially.
The reason I asked the question about advising students and assisting in the learning process and guiding young people is specifically because Maitri is the chair of the SEG Women's Network, and it seems to me that you've got a large demographic. You have a wide influence over interested, scientifically motivated people who are potentially looking, because of the SEG aspect, at the geosciences and maybe exploration work in particulars. So what do you tell these people, and how much advising does the SEG Women's Network do in total?
Interesting. I just had this conversation with Andrew Geary of the SEG, and it seems to be, you know, when it rains, it pours when it comes to podcasts. So and I said, we really have a shortage of Renaissance people. And again, it goes back to what we were just talking about, is make yourself a Renaissance person. I think sometimes when people look around my blog, or they follow me on Twitter for a certain reason, and then I start tweeting about, say, football, or suddenly it's about geophysics, or suddenly it's all about Mardi Gras, you know, or it's about Project Gutenberg, or the SEG Women's Network, or some conference I'm attending, or Indian food, you know, it's like, okay, I did not come here for football or Indian food, so I'm going to, you know, unfollow you, you know, because I'm a highfalutin scientist and I want serious business here. So, and to that I say, I think you need to be interested in a lot. I think you need to just, I find everything interesting, and I don't know if that's a personality flaw or that's a feature, or, you know, I don't know what it is, but I think it helps, and to say that I'm not interested in, I'm a geophysicist, so I don't want to get my feet dirty with camping and geology and, you know, looking at rocks and licking limestone and all that stuff. Yeah, you're doing yourself a big disservice, because that's something that you don't know, you don't have in your toolkit right now. So make yourself a Renaissance person. I would also say, open yourself up to math. Mathematics is one of those, mathematics programming, one of, you know, two of those key subjects where you can really go in a lot of different directions. So I think with math, if you understand mathematics, then, you know, you can do geophysics, you can do geochemistry, you can go backwards towards, you know, some other kind of analytical science. If you understand flow dynamics, you're going to understand it for hydrogeology, you're going to understand how oil flows, you're going to understand how wind works. So so if a problem comes along later that requires you really understanding the Navier-Stokes equation, you know, so you win, because you understand it and you can apply it to many different things. So I think being a scientist, getting those fundamentals down, understanding and reading a lot about physics and math, chemistry, biology, the basics, I think that's where the new ideas come from. And then pick up an article and read it. If you think it's about rebuilding a car engine and it's dry as hell, okay, you know, I excuse you, but it might save you someday, you know, it might help out. I just don't, I don't think there's ever a downside to acquiring knowledge on anything.
And how much advising, how much interfacing does the SCG Women's Network
We're
do
trying to
with
do
young
more
people?
We're trying to do more mentoring right now. We're a central network. So my main objective with the SCG's Women's Network right now is to branch out more globally. Right now, we've been around 5 years, and we have this core organization. We have a core committee, because everything at SCG is committees, um, uh, in which we have set up our strategy. We have these breakfasts every year. We have networking events. We've aligned with AAPG and other um, women, or I should say sister scientific societies to conduct networking events. But I think what I'd like to do is see a lot of initiatives come from students, and not enforce an agenda on students or on the globe. So I'd really like to reach out to the SEG student chapters and get students on board and say, okay, hey, all you students, come up with an idea. What do you think is the most pressing concern for you right now? What are your top 3 pressing concerns? And do something about it. Hold an unconference about it, or do something on the web. Get a hangout together. Let's talk about how to help you. I have already reached an age where I don't know what their problems are, so I can't be telling them what the problems are. They have to come up with it themselves and look for the solutions. So, and the same thing goes for the global outreach component. I really feel like, did we lose somebody?
No, we're still here.
So geophysicists in China are going to have a different set of issues than geophysicists in, say, Latin America or Houston, Africa, pick a country. So again, we are there to provide support. Mentorship is going to be difficult because right now we have maybe 10 core people who are very engaged. So how are you going to do a lot of this and serve a very large population of students and global members with a very small core? So that's something that we're thinking about right now. Is, okay, we have one person in the SEG doing support. We have 10, max 10 core members who are really engaged in activities and pushing agendas forward, and who want to do so many things. So I think the answer is going to come from enabling other people in other parts of the world and say, okay, now you create your own, Australian instance of the SCG Women's Network. We'll provide all the materials and support. Please engage the student chapters there, and run your own conference, run your own wine hour, or if you can't, then try to get together at your regional conference and hold some kind of summit to talk about issues and come up with solutions for how do you do all this sitting in the United States or sitting in a small geographic portion of the world? That we're trying to come up with solutions for that.
Sure, decentralization power. That's awesome.
Right.
What other things does the SCG Women's Network do?
So, first of all, it's about having a community that we are here to identify women's issues in geophysics, whether it's in the office, whether it's in the field. What are things that are problems, and also wins for geoscientists? What have we been doing? What have we not been doing enough of? How much can we? How many more obstacles do we have to remove? And what are some good things that people are doing that you can share with other women geoscientists? And it's not. I don't want to say it's a women only organization. I say it's for feminists. So if you support women getting equal pay and being equally represented and having equal access to geophysics classes or the field or and especially jobs and promotions, then you're automatically invited to be a part of our network.
How do we get involved? How do we join up?
You can. Well, we're at SEG_WNC on Twitter. That seems to be our big social media outlet right now. So I think how you and Matt can help is talk to your friends about it. Don't just talk about geophysics. Talk about what other things you can be doing to remove obstacles for your fellow geophysicists, be they women or minorities or some other underprivileged group of people who can't have access to the study and the profession of geophysics. What are we doing to help those people come up with the ideas of the future? So we're at SEG_WNC on Twitter, and we're also soliciting ideas for how to be more active on social media. I'm not this huge fan of chatting on LinkedIn, and Facebook just seems, Facebook seems so hit or miss depending on who's on Facebook. And I use Facebook for a completely different reason than anything professional. So, yeah, Facebook's all about, hey, look at, the costume I made, or look at the, the wine I'm drinking. That's what Facebook's for.
All right, so we've got a link now in the show notes to SEG_WNC if you want to get in touch with Maitri or the SEG Women's Network. What are the biggest issues you guys are talking about, barriers to women geoscientists in industry right now?
First off would be when budgets are cut, the first thing to go is the people factor. So we're not looking to groom women into leadership. We're not looking to groom women into other technical roles. Also, when it comes time for promotions, when it comes time for giving scholarships or anything that should happen in academics or job kind of situation, I think that we say, we just go back to the old traditional model of doing things. Is okay, we're just going to look at the old way, and then and when that happens, women get the short end of the stick. It's something that's measured, that's documented. So I think a big thing right now in this downturn is to keep women from losing their jobs disproportionately. It's to give them tips and tools for finding jobs. It's also in for instance, the first SEG post-conference SEG Women's Network post-conference workshop is going to be held on how to deal with bias and bullying in our profession, and tips and tricks to avoid that, to identify, avoid, deal with, put an end to bias and bullying. Another thing is we also just got the first anti-harassment policy published for the society as a whole. There's an a sexual harassment and anti-harassment policy at the SEG itself, but that's at a kind of a corporate level. But there wasn't one at the society level. So Eve Sprunt took the lead on that, and with our current president, John Bradford, worked very hard to get the society's first anti-harassment policy up. And there's the policy, the forms, they're all available on the SEG website right now.
So you're saying there was one for the SEG annual meeting specifically, but there wasn't one for the society?
No. There was one for the SEG as in the corporation.
Okay.
So there was, any employer has to have some kind of anti-harassment code. and
Oh, I see.
right.
Gotcha.
And then we did one. I think a couple years back we got a code of conduct during the meetings, especially on the show floor, the exhibit floor. We got that passed, but then it came to several people's attention all at the same time. It was a nice confluence of events where we did not have, as a society, we don't have an anti-harassment policy, and I think AGU made one recently. And so it's not just SEG that's having these problems. It's not just our
Sure.
society. I think it's, just science as a whole, and
Professional societies as a whole.
yeah,
Yeah.
science as a whole, professional societies as a whole, and especially, I always say this, in the physical sciences and the geosciences, we've always seemed to lag in terms of getting these kinds of initiatives off the ground. And I've always noticed that like bio and medical seem to be at the forefront. They're the early adopters for all kinds of things like technologies and behavioral policies and all that. But science, the physical sciences and geoscience, geophysics in particular, been way in the back. And I don't know why that is, and that may be a topic of conversation for another hangout. But
Yeah, my perception, because I'll admit to living in the kind of white male middle class bubble. I mean, obviously that's where I live. I have no choice but to live there, and waltzing through sort of corporate life or whatever. And then when I left and started hanging out more on the internet and going to things like Science Online and going to Wikimania and going to some of these kind of conferences and events and meetings happening in these sort of other domains, and just being blown away by not just the really conspicuous code of conduct for this meeting and all of that, like all of the stuff that's like, oh wow, this is a thing, but also going to the meeting and seeing the huge level of engagement and diversity and everything, and that being a new thing. Seeing, I mean, disabled people at a conference. I mean, it's crazy that's a kind of a conspicuous. I mean, it's embarrassing. I'm kind of horrified. And then I just read, and then started going to things like SciPy, computing, like coding conferences, where you would think, another sort of male-dominated, lots of discussion about role of minorities in there too. But I mean, there was a really interesting blog post by this geoscientist whose blog I read, who's also a coder, and he was talking about his university and their sort of diversity policies, the geoscience community and theirs, and the coding community. And these are his sort of three areas that he operates in. And he's saying the coding community is way out ahead of even his university. He just got a wheelchair. That was what had provoked this post. And he's like, I can't even get into the lift in my building. Like my wheelchair literally gets jammed in the door, kind of thing. And anyway, it was just a very moving and kind of eye-opening. Like, oh shit! Like, oh, excuse me, but oh wow! Like, I can't even comprehend how privileged I am. And I mean, I can't remember where it was now, but I'll try and put it in the show notes, but reading something about someone sort of saying, when they look at their community, and this is in scientific coding world, there's all these participants from North America, and all these participants from Europe, and all these participants from, Australasia, roughly in proportion to their populations, and nobody at all from Asia, and nobody at all from Africa, and nobody at all from South America. And I'm like, yeah, wow, we're just like that.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about intersectionality in that. Just because we're women doesn't mean that we have to only worry about women. What about Black women? What about Chinese women? It comes back to that regional aspect of it, and you could be a Black disabled woman, and that could be that's not something that we should shy away from. Ultimately, it's about access. Everyone should have access. Everyone should have a say, and I hate saying this because I don't like to have to justify my existence in geophysics or in the science or in the profession, but promoting someone like me, or because of my qualifications, but also because of the sheer fact that I'm a woman or have had a different set of experiences in my life, I think that diversity alone is going to open up big time doors for progress, new ideas. And
Mm-hmm.
if we just shut out whole groups of people because they're not part of our current norm,
Mm-hmm.
that's also a huge hindrance to progress. That's where the ideas are, where the idea is going to come from otherwise.
Especially, as you say, in a time when we've lost all these sort of not antique but traditional thinkers, so with a wide knowledge base, when innovation is much even more important than it ever has been. I want to shift gears here a minute because Maitri has got so many awesome things going on that we need to talk about a couple other than before we run out of time. Another big one is Gutenberg. Matt, tell us about Gutenberg.
I'm really not qualified, but I'm just I am interested in publishing, and I'm interested in openness, and obviously Gutenberg is this giant online open library. Yeah, I mean, how did you get involved in it, Maitri, and what are you still involved in it? And what's the what's the future for things like Gutenberg when it seems like everything's on the internet?
Everything is not actually on the internet. That's the problem. So I got involved with Gutenberg back in '92 when I was still in high school, and I met Michael Hart, who is the founder of Project Gutenberg, who was the founder of Project Gutenberg. Sadly, he passed away in 2011. He was just he's a daring fireball, just a big ball of energy. Just again, kind of like me, had many interests, and it was just appalling to him that people couldn't have access to books that were in the public domain, and that libraries had hordes of books that anybody could access, but people couldn't actually access them. And then you have this thing called the internet that was forming, and there was a huge backbone going through the Midwest at the time, and he was a young student at the University of Illinois. So he just started taking books from the libraries and the stacks and whatever was in the public domain. He started typing them in to this server. This big server that was that is this room, it's like sitting inside the server closet or the server room, and writing whole books, and
wow.
Creating libraries and mirroring them all over the world. And then people got really interested. This is a great idea, like making ebooks. So he invented the ebook.
Yeah.
And there were a bunch of us from University High School which is a laboratory high school attached to the University of Illinois, who would go over to the digital computing lab. We'd sit around and learn programming, play games, and that's when the Next machines were popular. So we had the little machines with the penguins on them. So learning how to program those machines, and he hung out there, and I just got involved in this group of thinkers who really believed in all the things that we're talking about, fairness, equality, access, doing reproducible science, doing great things, making new ideas. So he said, would you like to be a part of Gutenberg? And I said, what do I do? And so I digitized a few books, and I've not actually been, I've not been a digital publisher for Gutenberg. very fiercely believe in Michael's philosophy, and I like to do things like fight against copyright and keep the Gutenberg flame alive. So I became an advisor to Project Gutenberg because Michael trusted me with carrying that vision, and I'm on the board, but more importantly, I hold a part of the trademark, so that ultimately the goal is that I don't want Project Gutenberg to be sold to a corporation, and that it should be a truly not-for-profit public entity, that anyone should be able to start their own instance of Gutenberg, like you in New Orleans, Matt up in Canada, start your own instance of Gutenberg, host books, put books in the public domain, and again, it's like creating more instances of the SCG Women's Network and seeing what other people do with it and how they run with it. The same thing with Project Gutenberg. It's really about democracy and access and equality and having and making sure that our knowledge is not locked up in a safe somewhere and given, and that access is given to a very small few who pay a lot to get that. And it's really ridiculous, because look at Disney, look at how much they took from the public domain and made into copyrighted material. And now if I as much as fly a Disney flag outside my house and have a lemonade stand under it, I'm pretty sure that the Disney lawyers are going to swoop down and ask for 50% of the profits from that lemonade stand. No, it's that draconian, it's that ridiculous. And these are the kinds of companies that and our traditional publishing houses, I don't have to name them, but you know who they are, that they take research that was funded by the taxpayer, and then they make it into copyrighted papers that the public cannot access. So I've been having some health issues recently that I'd really love to learn more about and actually read some of these papers and figure out what's going on. But I don't have access to those Journal of American Medical Association papers because I don't have a subscription. But I paid for my American taxpayer money paid for those studies, and done in universities that are also paid for by the taxpayer. So I think it's just ridiculous that copyright rules in this day and age when there's so much information on the internet.
Yeah, I'm really conflicted because I know how much of a nightmare publishing is. Like, it is not trivial to take other people's work and make it into something that other people want to read. Like, it really isn't. And so I kind of I guess I understand why things cost some money. I do think that $35 for an article, for example, which is a common price on sort of Elsevier, is crazy. So I mean, there's a clear kind of disparity, or just they just buggered up the pricing model. But I also feel a bit like, I'm not sure I know how to articulate this properly, but as a kind of champion of open licenses and open source and open access, I do feel like undermining the licensing system around copyright sort of undermines open access. But in other words, so if you take something like Sci-Hub, which is this thing where basically you can download anything, and any scientific paper, illegally, like against the terms of the copyright agreements and so on. I do feel like, well, if anything is open, then what's the point in open source? Do you know what I mean? What's the point in open access? It sort of makes open access not matter. And I actually feel like the best response to that is don't cite or have anything to do with stuff that isn't openly licensed, and go to the openly licensed stuff. Of course, things like medicals, well, any research, I mean, that shuts out especially right now, because we're just coming off the back of like the proprietary scientific publishing era, that locks out a huge amount of very interesting research. Anyway, sorry, I sort of hijacked that to make a point that wasn't what you were talking about at all. But there's a lot of really interesting stuff, I think, around. I love that kind of, in principle, I like the subversive nature of, let's put all of literature and all of publishing on the internet where it belongs. But I also kind of sympathize with commercial publishing, because I is one kind of thing. Yeah, so I mean, is Project Gutenberg sort of still alive and well, and it's still digitizing stuff, and it's
absolutely, yep.
Yeah.
Still putting a lot of books online. Gutenberg.org.
Are they scanning things now, presumably? And
yeah,
it's like
OCR. A lot of books being destroyed in scanners for optical character recognition. But if it's a very if it's a rare book, you know, you do it the right way and scan it page by page. But yeah, there's a whole group called distributed proofreaders that where you can sign up to proofread scanned books.
Cool.
And there's Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, and then there's those of us on the board who do the running of it, and then there's the distributed proofreaders who, like I said, go through all the books and make sure that they're fit for public consumption. But to get back to your point, if I write something, yeah, I want to make some money off of it, but I don't think that my grandkids and some publisher who had nothing to do with me writing that book need to continue to reap profits decades after my death.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So, same thing with the programs. Like, great, you make money off of your program, fine. You know, that's how commerce is supposed to work. The person who helped you publish it, yeah, they make some money. Your kids get a little bit, that's great. No problem with that. But if you look at the percentages and you look at the numbers, it's the money that the artist or the programmer or writer ultimately ends up making is pennies on the tens of dollars and hundreds of dollars that the publishing companies are making, and for years and decades now. So that's where Project Gutenberg's stance is. It's not about free everything, you know. And today, it's about being more democratic, being more useful to society about it.
Is there a relationship between Google Books and Gutenberg? Do they collaborate in any way, or are they totally separate projects?
So Google Books can publish Project Gutenberg books. So there are Project Gutenberg books on Google Books. We don't do any publishing for Google Books. All books that we publish are directly for Project Gutenberg alone. But there's a huge header page that says, you know, there's a Gutenberg trademark on it, in that the integrity of the book itself is maintained by Project Gutenberg. So if you reproduce it on Google Books, we ask that you can reproduce it anywhere you want. All we ask is that you keep the header that this was an ebook created by Project Gutenberg on it, and so that, you know, someone comes along and decides that they're going to write anagrams of William Shakespeare's sonnets or something, that was not something that we put out there. That was that's a new work. So other than that, there are no restrictions on how to use Project Gutenberg books, really.
Well, it's a cool site. It's a great idea. I urge our listeners to go check it out. Again, there's a link to that in our show notes page, which will be linked in our forum, which is swung.rocks. So come check us out. There's a lot of good open source ideas on the forum itself related to, but not all about geosciences in particular. And follow us on Twitter. Go see Maitri on Twitter. There's tons of information out there. Maitri, thanks for coming on the show today. We've covered so much stuff. I hope everybody that's listening will go follow up with these links, because there's so much more to learn.
Well, let's do this again. It was a lot of fun. Well,
It was.
We have a lot more topics to talk about too. So.
I know, we did.
Yeah.
We didn't even cover, I think, a quarter of our notes. But anyway, thank you for coming on the show again. It was great.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Maitri.
See you soon.
See you guys next week. Bye-bye.